Niels.
There
How
it is.
are you?
I'm excellent. How are you, Christine?
I'm good. You know, Niels and I haven't really spoken for probably over a year now, other than very briefly. I think we should do a little introduction. And we met online, like so many of us do, came across each other on Facebook. We've recorded some things in the past. We've been on some panels together. And the one thing I really adore about Niels is, well, there's many things, but he's an experiential type of guy. And he writes very well and very intelligently, and he also researches. And so what's come up, and I will just say it this way, Niels, I think it's come up into what I will call our collective consciousness right now. And I'm referring to those of us that touch base or find we're compelled within inside ourselves to start looking down certain pathways, certain directions. And what I find often is that many of us are tuned. Like we're tuned to the same frequency, we're tuned to the same bandwidth. And so when I read your latest article that I think you did an extraordinary job on, and it's something right up along where I'm looking at right now, was about our health. And we can look at the health of the planet, like you said, chemtrailing, the frequency wars, the rollout of 5G, and all the things that you and I and many of our listeners are very aware of. My concern really is, Niels, is that those that are not aware of this, because without really solid base knowledge of what's going on, people are getting sick, our planet's sick. This is obvious to us, but I think many live in a bubble. And then I want to just go with you right now, because you're looking at health as the personal interface that we have with the world. Is how healthy, how vital is our energy. And it's not until people really get sick or facing some tragedy that they'll wake up often. So let me hand it over to you, because you started talking about this before I started recording.
Exactly. I think that human beings like to spend a lot of time in abstract thought, but abstract thought doesn't end up being much of a motivator. In the consciousness communities that we hang out in online, we like to trade in ideas, and we like to talk about how we're going to help wake up the rest of the world to what's going on, but it's all still at arm's length when we're just talking about ideas. And as you said, it's only when it becomes personal and impacts our individual lives, and that's where health really comes in. And I'm seeing it so much amongst friends who really know a lot about nutrition-based health, detoxification. They've been on that path. They're taking all the right supplements, and yet their health is still declining. And I think there's a good reason for that, and that's because the health of our planet is still declining. No matter how much we philosophize and talk about all the great ideas of where we're going and how the paradigm is shifting, it's not really going to shift until we all get an idea that it needs to shift. And for, I don't know, maybe half the population still, they don't really see the need to shift. Or if they do, we can maybe start to see the need to shift in financial matters, the economy, politics. We're seeing it seems like the dominoes are just starting to fall. But I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed it too, that the pharmaceutical cartel, the monopoly, is still pretty intact. In the medical field, I mean, sure, you can go onto YouTube and you can find a whole bunch of alternative medicine-based stuff that you can look into. But when it comes right down to it, most people still go to their doctor, they go get a prescription or surgery or radiation or whatever falls under the umbrella of war consciousness, which is what I've called it, because it's almost always our first response. Infection is probably the easiest thing, whether we're getting a cold or whether you have a staph infection. Your immediate thought is, I have to kill it. I have to kill it. I need to eradicate this thing. And we just, in medicine especially, we jump into this war consciousness idea. And I think the new paradigm is actually completely outside of war consciousness. And that's where I want to lead with the health discussion, is that we're moving into an inclusive consciousness, a cooperative consciousness, which doesn't automatically say this thing, in this case, let's say germs, shouldn't exist. Germs shouldn't exist. They should have never been created. God made a mistake, you know? And I just think that that's really bad thinking, that we're not qualified to decide what should and shouldn't exist. Everything that does exist, should exist, has a right to exist, and will most likely continue to exist. So our war consciousness is kind of a self-defeating approach. And I think after 100 years of the medical monopoly, we're starting to figure out that, hey, this strategy of kill it, burn it, cut it out doesn't actually work. Doesn't bring us back to health. It mitigates the symptoms of our disease, but it doesn't ever really bring us back to a place of health.
Well, I want to jump in here just for a second, because, you know, I have a contact also with a lot of people that I would call them, they're spiritual beings. I mean, they've spent their life dedicated to meditation, contemplation, doing good, helping others, all the things that we value. And they have a belief system that mind can overwrite matter. But what I see happening is it's not manifesting in our reality. And so you're actually in war with yourself and your consciousness, because you're saying, I can get myself out of disease by prayer, mind, or whatever. And I think that is vitally true for some people some of the time. But what we're getting fed back to us constantly is an aging body, a loss of vitality, the destruction of a planet. We're seeing what's happening to the children. I mean, like you said, war. I mean, and war and fear are, you know, they're put together. And this is what the pharmaceutical companies use. They use fear with their war consciousness. You know, you're going to die, and therefore you should be afraid, and therefore I'm going to bring out the nuclear bombs and the chemos and the radiation, and I'm going to rid you of this. And it's only a reflection of what's happening on the greater body of our earth. But it's a vital one, I feel, and I'm seeing this pop up everywhere I look on the internet right now, on Facebook groups. People are looking at our individual health. And, you know, what your article did, Niels, is you drilled it all the way down to, and I love it, our common ancestry, the mitochondria. And and so what we're looking at is that we are actually bacterially infested from top to bottom, and they're not our enemies. It's and I've learned this a long time ago, and maybe I'll share some other tidbits with you. So let me ask you though, Niels, to bring it in really personal, what got you looking in this direction? Because I've spoken with you on lots of subjects, but never directly along this line. What got you into your research?
Well, in my personal life, I was just having a whole bunch of little tiny health challenges come up. Like, for instance, as long as I can remember, I've always had a little tiny spot of psoriasis on the back of my head. So once a week I would pick at that little scabby spot, and that would be it. So I never thought about it. Then earlier this year, little spots of psoriasis started coming up in other places of my body. And one of them was on the palm of my hand. You can barely see that it just sort of still exists. But almost my entire palm was covered with really bad psoriasis. And it was getting itchy. And no matter what I tried putting on there, it was getting worse. Day by day, it was growing, it was spreading. And it's like, and there were other little aches and pains that were going on. And at one point, it was in the spring or the summer, my mother said to me, jokingly, half jokingly, "You're falling apart." And my mother's 78 years old. My dad's 84. And, to have my old mother tell me that I'm falling apart, it was like, I kind of feel that way. Yeah. And I take supplements, vitamins. I exercise every single day. I work up a sweat every day of my life. And yet here I feel I'm getting run down, and and I thought I need to overhaul my understanding of what health really is. And it was fun and exciting to discover that even though I'm in this consciousness where I'm always thinking about the oneness of humanity and our collaborative efforts that will be manifesting more and more as time goes on, that I was kind of in this idealized state of mind thinking about society in the future and things on the macro level. Yet when it came to my own body, I didn't have a positive view of the psoriasis on my skin. I wanted to get rid of it, kill this thing. What does it take to kill this damn thing? Or any fungus in my body. I could say between my toes, I would get itchiness between my toes that is fungal based, just tiny little things like that on their own, it's not going to send me to the doctor, but all these little things were building up. And the overall feeling is that, yeah, I am wearing down. Yes, I am starting to age and break down. And it was this realization, and it just brought my focus down to, well, what's the source of all of our disease? And the things that always come up are oxidative stress, leading to chronic inflammation, leading to autoimmune dysfunction. And between those three things, essentially every disease that you can name falls into or are a result of those three things occurring, or one or more of those three things occurring. They're brand new technologies, and the really exciting one is what's called redox signaling molecules. And this is a whole new communication system that's really less than 10 years old in the medical research. And it's the way in which the tiniest little players in our bodies, right down to our own individual cells, our own mitochondria, and all of the bacteria, fungi, molds, yeast, everything that's integrated into our systems, they communicate with each other continuously. And the main way that they communicate with each other is through redox molecule signaling. And there's essentially two different types of redox signaling. And the first product that I think is essential, and I hope eventually everyone on Earth is on this product or something similar, is called Restore. And it's a product developed by Dr. Zach Bush, whom I have to say right now, as far as health researchers and lecturers go, he's my absolute favorite lecturer. I've listened to hours and hours and hours of him talking, and just his general philosophy on life, his big picture view of life and biology and our place in the universe. It just coincides with everything I've always believed, but he's got the medical research background to back up everything he says and does. So this product that he developed, it was back around 2009, 2010 that he developed this product. So it really is brand new. But Restore, he creates the product by digging in the desert. So we went into the middle of the desert, I think in Nevada, and dug down to the layer of strata that is about 50 million years old. So that was a time when the Earth's biosphere was extraordinarily healthy, vibrant, diverse, and the soil was really, really alive. There was all sorts of microbiota, from bacteria to fungi to virus to molds to everything was in the soil, and it was all working together to produce abundant vegetation that could support dinosaurs up until about 50 million years ago, maybe even longer than that ago, that the dinosaurs actually died out. But up until that point, the soil was definitely very vibrant, very healthy, and all of the living things, all of the microbes that live in healthy soil, they put out redox molecules. Redox just means reductive, oxidative. All chemical reactions are either reductive or they're oxidative, meaning that in the reduction, an electron is taken, in oxidative, an electron is donated. That's really all it is. But this is going on all the time. Every second of every day, there's so many trillions and trillions of redox reactions going on wherever there's life. And what we didn't know up until recently is that this is the way all those little tiny life forms are communicating with each other. They have a molecular language. They're saying, hey, I'm here, I'm in these numbers, this is what I'm doing. And everybody announces what they're doing within the entire community of the microbial universe. And so what was produced 50 million years ago, I look at it as like a template. So those redox molecules from 50 million years ago still exist in the soil. The life has died out, it got compressed down, but all of their language, everything that they were telling each other at that time about how do we get along, how do we coexist in an intelligent, integrated manner, that entire blueprint can be carried forward in time to a time when now, if we compare the soil that is growing our food that humans consume, the soil is incredibly dead. Like we can't even begin to compare the soil because chemical agriculture doesn't put things in the soil to promote bacterial life. It doesn't really care. It just says we can add these certain chemicals and it'll make food that looks like food, but when you get right down to the microscopic level of what this food really is, it's not food in the historic context of what our ancestors would have considered food. It's just not, because it wasn't produced by the life in the soil. So the product Restore, so he's made a dirt tea, is basically all it is. It's tea made from dirt. And that's what it looks like when you pour it out of the bottle. It just looks like a very weak tea. And it kind of tastes just like weak, dirty tea is all it really is. It doesn't have much flavor at all. But when we put that back into our body, it does several things. It's an invitation for greater biodiversity within our microbiome inside our bodies. And I want to point out that bacteria, molds, fungi, yeast, viruses, they are integrated throughout our bodies, throughout our tissues. Our tissues are not sterile, which up until recently, modern medicine thought that, well, bacteria shouldn't be in tissue. It shouldn't exist between our cells. Well, actually it does. It does quite prolifically. And the only places in our bodies where bacteria is not integrated with our tissue is, say, in a cancerous tumor. A cancerous tumor will only consist of human cells, and all of the other microbial life will have been expunged from those tissues. So only in an extremely diseased, sickened state do our tissues become sterile and all of the other microbial life has been forced out. And to me, that's obvious that there's been a breakdown in communication. So if we can put those redox molecules, that record, that blueprint of how everything got along at one time, if we can put that back into our body, that's a way of telling everything in our body, all of the microbes, that this is how we get along. This is the blueprint of an ancient civilization where everyone was included. It was ultra intelligent and was extremely adaptable. And every participant in the living soil of that time, they weren't in competition with each other. They were in cooperation with each other, having an overall blueprint or language where they could communicate and say, this is how we coexist, so that not one microbe dominates the situation and takes advantage. Which leads me back to the whole war consciousness thing. Almost all of us have this, the war consciousness permeates our idea of health. Like when we when a child asks a parent, when the child's sick, well, what's going on? Why am I sick? Parents traditionally, and my own parents included, explained it to me that there's this war going on in my body. There's the good guys that are fighting for the health of your body, and there's the bad guys that have to be defeated. And that's just the way it's presented to us, even in childhood, and I think it still is. And we accept that, and that just kind of, even if we never think about it again, that just dominates the idea of what's going on in our body. So instead of just calling it war consciousness, it's an every man for himself kind of idea is what we've got in our bodies. It's the human being, our human cells have to fight everything else. And all the bad guys are always microbes. Microbes, germs, they're always the bad guys. They're the ones.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, it's like the survival of the fittest mentality has been so embedded in our consciousness that we do think that everything that we're up against is a battle. And in some ways, Niels, it is, but this, what you're talking about is shifting that consciousness, you know, to even your psoriasis and any fungal overgrowth. It's really your body signaling you, okay, of some imbalance, and it's giving you the ability to do what you did, right? I mean, there's research out there right now too. It's like, get your hands in the dirt. I mean, they have shown again and again and again, if you can be in nature, if you can dig a garden, get your hands, they're using that. And, you know, really what it is, what you're saying ultimately, Niels, is that redox communication network is what life's all about. These are the natural pathways, and we don't have to, when we're in harmony with that, there is a shift in our system. But what you're saying, and I've known this since I was in my 20s. I learned very early on from being a very sick child with constant fevers and crisis and bronchitis, and my family's plagued with psoriasis and asthma and all of this. One moment in my life, I went, I'm tired of this. I don't agree with it anymore. I absolutely took a stand. I do not agree with this. And I never had bronchitis again. You know, and so that's taken me through many, many years, but it's not easy because it's constantly being thrown at us. It is constantly being reinforced that there's something erroneous about us, something lacking in us, and we have to fight all these things. So go ahead. I just wanted to throw in a few pieces here, because what you're saying while you're talking and I'm hearing is that this is a step to taking us even into a deeper communion with all life. Really, it is. But if we don't have our health, if we're lacking that vital energy that we have and our connection, then our health is going to continue to deteriorate. So I find that fascinating. Somebody's making a tea from the old microbe patterns on the planet. And don't you feel too, though, Niels, and I want to step a little sideways because we've talked about this, and I know you've lived in the forest foraging. Did you find during that time that communication network that you're talking about on a very scientific level is in fact existent and we can tap into it?
Absolutely. And I think that's where the revolution is that we're going to have to reintegrate ourselves. And I think it comes, the as above, so below idea that I'm thinking of now is the below is the microscopic. We're the above, and we've been kind of head in the clouds thinking everything on the macroscopic level. But on the microscopic level, if we just look at how outnumbered we are, whether you want to look at it in terms of DNA, human DNA, as opposed to all the other DNA in the biosphere, I mean, we're incredibly outnumbered. But just at the level of the microbes in our human cells, we have at most 100 trillion human cells in our bodies, and we have, working in concert with those 100 trillion cells, about 1.5 quadrillion microbes at all times. They're mostly centralized in our gut. That's where we have most of those bacteria and yeast and molds and fungus and whatever. But they are also integrated throughout our bodies on our skin, and they carry out up to 90% of our metabolic function is carried out by things that are non-human. And so our lives are directly dependent upon this vast community. We're so outnumbered in our own bodies, 15 to 1 by the microbes to our human cells. They're much smaller than our human cells, but in sheer numbers, there's 15 times as many of them as there are of us. So, and another thing that Zach Bush likes to talk about, Dr. Bush, viruses. There's 10 to the 31 viruses on Earth. That's 10 million times the number of stars in the universe.
Wait,
how many viruses?
Give me the number again. How many viruses?
10 to the 31. So that's 1 to 31.
Okay. Yeah.
Virus. So
right.
10 million times the number of stars in the universe is how many viruses are on Earth currently. That's the best estimate anyways. Nobody's actually counted. But if these microbes wanted us dead, we would have been dead in an instant. We would have never begun if the microbes were in any way against us. And that's the idea of the mitochondria as our ancestors that I wrote into the article. That's kind of just my idea. That I was reading, it always kept coming back to the mitochondria, and that I've always known they have separate DNA, so they don't share the same DNA that we do. They have their own separate DNA, which can be traced through our mother's line, because the mitochondria get passed down from our mothers. But the way that I envisioned it, I'm going to build a new mythology where the mitochondria are our ancestors, because it makes more sense than ancient aliens to me, tampering with our DNA. I see DNA now as playing such a tiny role in what's actually going on, because our DNA is just one little tiny player in this vast soup of DNA that's not human. Yeah, so if these things are against us, we wouldn't stand a chance. Obviously, we are meant to work in harmony, in concert with the entire microbial world. And if the mitochondria at some time in our ancient past were the tiny little microbes that learned how to utilize oxygen for the first time, because at first, ancient Earth, there was no oxygen in the atmosphere, started to build up. So it would make sense that some microbes would recognize that, learn how to use oxygen, and from there, perhaps even figure out how to construct multicellular organisms. That we could literally be a project of the mitochondria. They could have, in their little microbe intelligence, in concert with other microbes, they could have figured out how to build multicellular organisms that function primarily on oxygen. And the mitochondria, that's what they do every second of every day inside our bodies, is they use oxygen primarily as the fuel source and create ATP, which is the chemical fuel source that makes everything in our bodies go. So energy lies at the base of everything. The mitochondria are the ones producing the energy. They've been around a lot longer than we have. So I think it's useful to think of them as our ancient ancestors. And our thinking needs to reintegrate ourselves back into this community idea, because at the microscopic level, we are a community. We are not individuals, and we have to stop thinking of human beings as these individuals with just this mind. Mm-hmm. There's the head mind that we love to just think and contemplate with. We have our emotional center, the heart, the hormones. That's in our head, it's the electrical neural system that is the communication pathway there. The emotional heart center, not that the heart's a gland, but it's the secretion of hormones, the chemical messengers. That's what runs our emotional consciousness. And then the other consciousness that's only come out recently, the gut consciousness has only come out in recent years, where people are actually talking about it, and it's gaining traction, that people understand, hey, we have this third brain, but it's actually, in my view, it's the first brain, because it's the brain that allowed the other two to develop. It's our foundation. And there's also this direct correlation between the bacteria or the microbes inside our gut are a direct reflection of the soil microbes. Whatever's in the soil, there's going to be this direct correlation between the soil that's producing our food and the microbes in our gut that are capable of digesting that food. There have to be a lot of overlap there, or else we take in food that our human cells don't have the capacity to digest. There's lots and lots of food, especially things that have medicinal value. Our bodies don't know how to use the medicines that are in the food, but the bacteria, the microbes, they do. They know how to break it down, extract it. They know where to send it. They know how to use it.
I'm listening to you explain a process in the body that for most people they're ignorant of, right? Most people really, and we're talking again, the reason I do videos and I write is because I've learned in my own life that the more information I have, such as the mitochondria, my gut flora and fauna. I mean, I've worked with these things for many, many years. I've worked in, even in a shop, and I'll go back to the supplement thing in a second with you. And I know about the depletion of our soil. I know about the frequency interruptions to our systems. I know about, the endocrine system, which is so vital for our health. I mean, these are the dancing things inside of ourself, and they, they're dependent on, as you're saying, we're actually biomes. We're actually, like, if you took the Earth sphere and then you compacted it into a human form, and this is why I've always been saying for years and years, it's the body, it's the body, it's the body, because the more I know about my body, the more I know that I'm basically space, the more I know that I'm fundamentally energetic. And then I start to build from there up into, like you're saying, into the mitochondria. I studied ATP. I looked at how energy is created within the human form. Why this is important, this information, isn't so that somebody can come to you or me and say, okay, what do I need to take? This is really, to me, Niels, is about communion with your own self. This as above, so below is all right here within us. It's not out there. It's all right in here. It's in here in connection with everything else. And like you were saying, and it has to be in conjunction.
Well, as long as there's communication, right? There's going to be trust built. And kind of the way I see, if we look at our history as somehow being degenerative, that things have broken down, it's because communication is broken down. If we feel that things are degenerating in our bodies, I would say again, it's because communication is breaking down. All of our bodies are so incredibly complex, as is the entire Earth biosphere. It's so incredibly complex. What's going to maintain the intelligence at that level of complexity? Well, there's only really one answer, and that's going to be communication. And if the communication systems break down, what naturally happens is that things factionalize. So things break into factions, and then it's almost natural that this every man for himself mentality inserts itself. And then suddenly, instead of an overall conscious concept of communion and communication, instead of that, you've got things vying for control and for power. And we can see that on the human level in our society, for sure. We can see right now, the political left and the political right, they can't even talk to each other. It just, the communication is completely broken down, and our society seems very factionalized and fractionalized. And to bring it back to health, I think that a lot of us, and myself included up until recently, had this almost crazy idea that we could somehow individually be healthy in a world that is completely unhealthy, that we can somehow be these little islands, this oasis in the midst of ill health. I mean, our world is suffering, its health is declining, and we can't be in denial of that and have any reasonable expectation that, oh, well, I'm going to be healthy even though everything around me is unhealthy. And I don't think that it can actually work that way, that we will restore our health and the health of the planet together. It's not a separate thing at all. There's not going to be a whole bunch of healthy humans on a diseased planet.
Well,
We're going to...
Something that is really deep in me, and it's been there for a while, and I've been writing about it, and sometimes it's really hard to move through it because there's a great body of people right now that they've got a lot of information. They understand the vibrations, the frequencies of love and compassion and all of that. And I see many people building their own bubbles, right? They build their own bubble of reality. And I think if you're one of those people saying we are all one, right? And I get it. I mean, the higher my vibration, the more vital my energy, I'm going to have an effect depending on who I am and what I'm vibrating at on my immediate environment, or perhaps even a larger environment, you know. And I oftentimes don't think we really realize how far reaching our energetic levels can go towards change. But I can't discard the fact that most of our world is at war. I just can't. You know, I can't, you know, say that we're being poisoned by pesticides, that all the toxins that are being dumped in our rivers and our oceans. And I mean, I don't even want to name it anymore. If you don't know about this, then you've got a lot of homework to do, right? Vaccination programs, you know, all of this stuff, you know, I'm to the point where, okay, I see it, I get it. We are literally poisoning ourselves and our world. Now, I'm not going to go into the philosophical question of like, is there a reason behind this? Well, there probably is. But the vital thing is that if we're going to take a philosophy that we're all one, that means everything. It doesn't leave out, like you're saying, it doesn't leave out the viruses. It doesn't leave out the microbes. It doesn't leave out the bacteria. And it certainly doesn't leave out the other humans on the planet that don't have the benefit that you and I have, Neil. My love has always been kind of health, right? And so I'm looking like you. I'm looking for the vital things that are missing, and how do we help each other with that? So I'm sorry, I get off on my passionate rants here.
I think our major task is one of reintegration, and just having this new perspective of reintegrating ourselves on a microscopic level has given me a whole new perspective that, you know, that's how I'm going to reintegrate myself back into the biological world. Sure, it's great to go out into the forest and walk around and forage, and that's going to help me, but it's going to help me on the microscopic level to bring more biodiversity into my body and to increase my body intelligence. That's what it's all about to me now, is that the more diversity I can expose myself to, I can expose my body to, the more diverse foods, the more diverse microbes, the more diverse environments, that's all going to increase my body intelligence. My body intelligence can then integrate into the incredibly vast intelligence of the Earth's biosphere. Like, that is just such an unfathomable complexity, that how intelligent must nature be in order to hold so many millions and millions and millions of species in balance and able to coexist over billions of years. I mean, it's such an incredible intelligence that already exists. And that, I know that a lot of the angst about the future is about technology. Well, the way I'm looking at it now is that the Earth really is our technology. That is our extension beyond what we look at as our human bodies. That is our expanded self. That's what if we can integrate this consciousness with the gut consciousness all together, we're tied into this incredible technology at the gut level.
Mm-hmm.
And if everything is communicating in that mind, and then the gut mind can communicate to the emotional mind, which can communicate to the thinking mind, and put it all together, then we become a functional unit as part of the entire Earth biosphere technology. Because anything that the internet can do, the Earth can do way better, more efficiently, balanced, you know, and I really, really see that as the future, even as we're racing headlong into this idea of transhumanism. And I mean, that it doesn't hold any appeal to me. I don't see us actually going that direction.
Yeah, well, obviously we're between, let's just call them two major forces right now, right? There are those that serve this agenda, which is the technocrat, transhumanistic agenda, the belief, the arrogant stupidity of thinking that we can create anything via internet or wiring or even quantum mechanics that even compares to this earth communion, really. And through the earth, and now we know we're communing with the sun, the solar system, the stars. We have within our hand, literally, the ability to commune with the vastness of interstellar space and interstellar space. You know, so I was thinking that, I thought, no matter what, I mean, you're talking about trillions and trillions of mechanisms that are going on every single moment that we're talking, of a communication, of a network that includes fungi, trees, rocks, microbes, cellular structures, all of these things that you're talking about. This communication network, right? How could we ever arrogantly think that this machine that we're talking through right now could ever reach a state of being as that? Right? I mean, it's just, it can't. And yet, you know, I feel sometimes, Neil, that this counterforce, this transhumanistic, this mechanization, I call it the authority, right? There's an imposition of authority that the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, the big conglomerates, the war machine, basically fundamentally the war against life machine, you know, is really compressing us in a way into what you're talking about. We have to go really, really deep inside and pull up the answers, which you said it, Niels, and I almost want to end it here. Our superpowers, if you will, depend on diversity. It's the diversity of the nature, like you're exposing yourselves to microbes. That's why all these sanitizers and perfumes and all the stuff that they're, you know, I mean, I can't stand it when I go through these stores that have these little, you know, hand sanitizers, right? Not only are they like killing off the microbes that you need, they're also injecting, really bad hormone disruptors into your system, into your endocrine system. So, I mean, yeah, I get very passionate about it, but it is that really, Niels, what we're talking about here. I mean, it's health related directly to you, me, and our family members and those close to us. It has a much deeper consequence and a much deeper meaning, really vital meaning for all of us to start to do that. And I think that's probably one of the, like, we can talk about microbes and all the functions of the body, which I find fascinating. But the biggest overriding thing that I see in the human consciousness right now is to take back your own authority. I still see that as being very, very vital. And we can use this machine in front of us, right? This internet, to find out almost anything we want to find out. I mean, really can. You keep coming across new people. I come across new people. I'm going to look up Dr. Zach. What's his last name?
Bush.
Bush. Okay, I will definitely look that up and look at his research. It makes sense to me, right? It makes internal sense to me, you know. And so, I mean, if we have several more talks, as I know you're doing other investigations, I'm very interested, you know, myself in that. I would like to put out maybe small bites of information that people can digest and see where it turns in them. Is that if you put those two confronting forces together, this one says we all must be the same, and this one says diversity is life.
What you were saying about diversity, yeah, I just had a little bit in my notes that greater diversity, if we look at nature, leads to more complexity. Diversity, complexity correlated, which to me requires expanded consciousness or greater intelligence in order to coordinate, to accommodate diversity. And nature is always self-regulating and self-organizing, that there is no authority in nature whatsoever. The natural world doesn't set up authorities. That whole concept of authority is kind of where our consciousness goes wrong. And I guess that's probably the root of war consciousness, is those who claim to be the authority versus everyone else, right? And
yeah, so we have what we could call a pathogen of a sort that set itself up as authority, and it didn't set it. I mean, it didn't set itself up as an authority via communication and communion and that overall, you know, sacred embracing of life. It didn't set itself up as authority that way. It set itself up as authority because we know better, we can control, and it seems that it itself, even if it started out innocuously in certain ways, has come to a full-blown, you know, in our faces. Now that we don't want its authority, now it's going to say, you will have my authority no matter what, right? And that's the, you know, trying to mandate vaccines and all of that. So if we look at that just on that level, we're looking at a diseased state that's affecting all of life on our planet, if not elsewhere. And so instead of fighting it, because we can't, what is it, is that what you're saying is what we need to do is feed ourselves vital energy, vital organisms, vitality, life, and therefore that, and you know, behind all of it, and I know you know this and everybody does, but we talk about it, is fear. Because the authority wants to keep us in fear. It wants to keep us running to it every time we sneeze or get a fever or, you know.
Well, it's about separation, about isolating, about factionalizing, breaking things apart, disrupting the unity of cooperation. I mean, that's what authority does. That's where authority derives its power, is through this whole idea of separation and isolating. When you talk about a pathogen, I don't believe that pathogens come and suddenly invade our body, that our body was completely pathogen free and then suddenly we're exposed to this pathogen and it invades and takes over. I think the pathogens are in us all the time. They're there in small quantities, and then certain conditions arise where they will overgrow and dominate. But I think that has the most to do with our overriding consciousness still is this war consciousness. Even, I'm only going to speak for myself, but even for myself, who I consider myself to be on the edge of consciousness exploration and all this newer philosophy, and yet I can see where I have this separatist consciousness, this isolationism, of being special. If that's the overall consciousness that dominates this body unit, then any microbe that's under that consciousness is kind of forced into that every man for himself mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever pathogen, if there's an opportunity for it to overgrow, because it's living in a every man for himself community, it's going to take the opportunity. Whereas the other consciousness, which is the cooperative inclusive, says, hey, pathogen, you're welcome to be here, but under the auspices of the cooperation, inclusiveness, consciousness, here's your niche. You get to, because every pathogen serves some purpose in the overall life. There's some reason why it exists, whether we know what that reason is or not. So there is an ideal template or blueprint where everything is supposed to exist. And if the environment changes, there's a reason why this pathogen needs to suddenly proliferate and deal with whatever's come up in the environment. So the idea is never that we need to get rid of this, we need to cut that out, we need to wall that off. And that's what I see in the world. Of course, authority is always trying to build walls, separate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our health, it's a profound shift. I mean, I keep talking about it almost in the same terms over and over, but it's so hard to get at how important this idea of, at our very basic body awareness level, we have to have some sort of inclusive, cooperative, overriding consciousness and quit pitting ourselves against the rest of the world, because it's so conditioned, so ingrained into us that we're in this struggle, we're in this fight. And yes, in a way we are, but the overall consciousness has to recognize that everything that's here has the right to be here in some capacity. Doesn't mean that you're allowed to dominate and control and set yourself up as an authority, but you do have the right to be here. You do have the right to participate, and there's a way that we can all participate and cooperate and continue to exist that continues building more diversity, more life, more consciousness, more intelligence. That's the road that we should be traveling.
I will underline that, and I think it's a good place for us to just sit with each other on this, Niels, is that I also went through a process of like how to stop war. And when it hit home with me, you know, that's where it hit home. It hit home with me. Stop being at war. You know, stop seeing everything as an enemy. I mean, of course a pathogen has, the common sense is a pathogen has a perfect role in all of this, because it can't proliferate unless it's in a sick environment. And so when it proliferates, it gives us the clues we need that we're sick, we're out of balance, we're out of that diverse nature, right? Whether it's a consciousness war or it's a real war or it's an illness in a body. And since we're looking right now at a world and human biome and the human body, we know right now we're at a very critical stage here. And so I don't choose to see, I can be really flippant sometimes and sarcastic, the idiots that think that they are, you know, the authority on the world. I don't really see them as my enemy. My choices now have been to interform and inform, and also not to pander to ignorance. You see, there's something that I find people do quite often is like, well, you know, they're not quite ready to hear the truth yet, or, you know, those sort of things. I can't do that. You know, I have to be sensitive. I have to be in communion with whoever I'm speaking with, not always. But it's like, I can't just sit back either, because perhaps you and I, Niels, and others are part of the immune response right now. right? We're a very natural part of an immune response, and each of us has a very individual, unique role in that, right? I may be looking at this over here. Right now, Niels is focusing down into, the cellular level, and I do believe it needs to, people really need to understand what mitochondria they really do need to. How does your body make energy, friends? If you're not fascinated by your own body, how does your body, how is this actually functioning, right? These are things that I like to talk about because it's trying to inspire others to do what you're doing and what we're all collectively doing.
And the good news right now is that we do have emerging tools that are going to help us at the health level. And right now, most of the tools that I'm looking at are about inserting more intelligence into our bodies and the ability for our bodies to communicate internally more effectively. And so maybe the next time we talk, we'll maybe talk a little bit about specific tools that are available.
Right. Well,
But
I know you're going to be writing more articles, and I will put, your blog and everything on there along with any recommendations you have so people can do their own investigation. But you're right. That's another thing. The other side of the whole coin is that everything to return to health, to return to diversity is already on the planet, including technology, right? Yep. It's just like more we can work up and freeing up these things and seeing them in the outer also will reinforce to everybody else that, yeah, real change is possible on the larger organism. So I would like to, I got really, in a good way, triggered by what you were writing, because it's something I've looked into for a long time. And I currently am not taking anything at all, right? I'm not. And it's very interesting because I was speaking to a friend of mine who's tried literally everything. She's been a breatharian. She's done immense amount of things, looking for her health. And I don't think those things are wrong either. I think we all have to go, if you're doing this and I'm doing that and somebody else is doing this, it's because if we're listening to our inner drive, we're taking ourselves to the place for the next part of what we each need to learn. But I was a supplement maven. I sold supplements and I took courses in supplements, and I had access to them for reasonable prices, if not free. And I will say they helped me a lot at a time when I needed supplementation, right? For lots of reasons. And then I worried, oh my God, I can't get my supplements anymore. My health is going to deteriorate. Oh my God, what's going to happen to me? And it's been years. I felt like I had to micromanage my body. Oh my God, the more I knew. Oh my God, if I don't take this product, oh my God, I'm going to fall apart, right? And, so I kind of worked through that, but I still am very, I will, suggest supplements to people when they really need them. There's no doubt about it. But
I totally relate to what you were just saying, in that I've taken a lot of supplements throughout my life as well, and felt a reliance on them. But now in the last couple months that I'm looking into these other things that are not really nutrients, they're just injecting better communication into my body. What I've already found is less need for supplements. I'm taking less supplements. And with the Restore, since it's the one specific product that we've mentioned so far, I've been on it for a little over a month, and I didn't plan this at all, but I haven't had a drop of alcohol in the last month, whereas I used to have one beer every day after supper, and I loved my one beer a day. And I got on the Restore, and I just stopped buying beer at the store, and then I stopped buying scotch, and I haven't had any alcohol in a month. And I've also noticed that I stopped buying bread. I didn't want wheat. So and none of this was planned. There was no conscious decision where I said, no more alcohol, no more beer, no more scotch, no more wheat, no more bread. It just was an afterthought. It was like, oh, I haven't been buying those things. I haven't been eating those things. And I think that the restore is subtly telling my body, it's giving me a different list of cravings. Like I don't crave the things. And I think what was happening before is that the cravings that I was getting before was the cravings of, say, a candida overgrowth. One beer every day. Got to have that one beer that feeds the candida, right? It's something like that. So I'm noticing already that with the restore, it's already changing very subtly, very, very subtly. But
you're talking on a communication level, right? I mean, this is really what you're talking about, why it's so vital to understand that communion or communication. So now that your gut, okay, has this more diverse biosphere inside, right? From these ancient memories, really memories. I mean, they're embedded memories, which we can talk about homeopathy another time. But, so it's now communing with the rest of your system. Right? That's what I'm getting from that. So
exactly.
Very natural. I'm not fighting my desires anymore. I'm not going, oh my God, I can't eat bread, or I need to stop drinking alcohol or stop smoking or whatever we're fighting all the time. You're finding it's just a very natural, beautiful step, right?
Exactly. When there's better communication, there's no need to fight. And we all know that from our relationships, right? Bad communication, we fight. Good communication, we don't fight. So I'm already noticing that only a month in. So I'm very, very encouraged with that product. Other things that I'm trying that we'll talk about it at a later date. And that's where the next essays are going to go. I'm going to go through it kind of. Each essay will focus on one particular product, but they all kind of overlap, and there's more of the overall philosophy behind all of it that will be revealed in the series as well.
Since this is going longer, and I always tell myself, don't talk so much, listen to Niels, but it's like, I can't help but, want to share my experiences, because you're also talking about empirical knowledge. We're talking about being your own authority, like, and having the ability to really go in and do your research. And not everybody can afford I don't know how much Restore costs, where is it available? But taking what you're saying, right? All right. What you're really talking about is a product, which is the brilliant research of a man, and utilizing that, even if you can't buy something, which is really being in touch with soil, microbes, all these that kill the germ functions. I've long ago, stopped using germ killers and antiseptics and mouthwashes. And, our mouth is a living world of microorganisms, right? And we're killing it off right there. So, those are little steps. And then if we want to do this again, Niels, since we've gone, through different phases of this, do shorter and just talk about very specific products that you're using, experiences you're using. Because I do see, though, that this transits all dimensions. I really do. It's, maybe not everybody needs to hear that right now. But it's so vital what you're bringing forward right now about quit fighting it. And it can be in service to anywhere anybody is, right?
Exactly.
If you're fighting sugar cravings, right, it's not even you that wants the sugar.
Right. That is exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. I know it's really easy between the two of us to conversation could go just about anywhere.
I know. And it doesn't matter, so like, I'm not very good at self-censoring myself. It was like this morning, I was like, Niels is onto something here, and, he needs to express it. But I do feel like there's a synergy in our energy. There's always been that, Niels. And
yes.
We're not in competition. Niels and I aren't trying to be the ultimate authority here on health.
That is true. So hopefully the next essays that come out will be inspiring to you as well. And, just give me some feedback, and we'll decide when we want to talk next. And
so, Niels, are you open to having people contact you, or do people contact you, or you have a?
I am open to people contacting me.
Okay. Well, I find it, again, just underline diversity, and if we really look at it, it's like we have been being funneled into lesser and lesser and lesser functionality, really vital energy, vital connections. And so let's just be, for all of us, an expansion back into the diverse nature, and be friends with the microbes, friends.
We're going to have to make friends with the microbes. Yeah.
I
I don't see any other way. There are friends, there are allies, there are ancestors, there are future tech. So.
Okay. Wonderful, Niels. And I'm going to throw you a big kiss, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.